Night, FBI and DEA arrest 67 funeral homes smuggled drugs in coffins with bodies.
On the morning of Monday 15th, federal agents made a discovery so disturbing, so deeply woven into American death itself, that even seasoned investigators stood in stunned silence. 67 funeral homes across 12 states, hundreds of thousands of fentanyl pills, tons of cocaine and heroin, and the bodies of the deceased had become the perfect mules for the deadliest cartel operation ever conceived on American soil. This is the story of Operation Eternal Rest, a federal takedown that would unravel one of the most ingenious and grotesque smuggling networks ever documented. A network that did not just infiltrate law enforcement, it infiltrated the very institutions of death itself. And at the center of it all stood one man, Governor Marcus Devereaux of Illinois, a man who had quietly transformed his state into a continental drug empire fortress, using the dead as cover and the living as accomplices. What you are about to hear is what happens when ambition meets darkness, when power decides that silence is more profitable than law, and what it costs when a system designed to protect the living is hijacked to conceal the sins of the dying. The operation began with a single funeral home in Gary, Indiana. A routine death certificate, a casket that felt heavier than it should have. An ICE agent named Sarah Chun, conducting border surveillance on unrelated fentanyl movements, noticed something: an unusually high volume of funeral services from a home called Eternal Peace Mortuary. Deceased individuals from across Illinois and Indiana, all requesting immediate cremation, all with families that never held viewings, all with unusually fast processing times. It was a whisper, the kind of operational detail that most agencies would have missed. But Chun did not miss it. She flagged it. The DEA took notice. Within 3 weeks, they were watching Eternal Peace Mortuary from across the street. What they saw would reshape the entire investigation. Every 72 hours, a black hearse would leave the mortuary, not heading to a cemetery, not heading to a cremation facility. The hearse would drive to a warehouse outside of Chicago. At 3:17 in the morning, federal teams moved. This is where it began. 3:17 a.m. The warehouse district in Aurora, Illinois. Dead streets. Cold wind cutting off Lake Michigan. The fog was so thick you could not see the building across the street. FBI SWAT teams, DEA agents in black tactical gear, ICE investigators with electronic surveillance equipment, all moving like shadows through the industrial corridor. No sirens. No announcement. Just the sound of boots on pavement and the crackle of radio communications kept whispers. They hit the warehouse on all 4 sides. Flashbangs erupted through windows. The sound waves were so violent they ruptured the eardrums of anyone standing outside. Men in respirators rappelled from the roof on black ropes, descending into the darkness like executioners from an oil painting. The front door exploded inward under a battering ram that weighed 400 pounds. What agents found inside made them call for backup immediately. The warehouse was not a distribution center. It was a processing facility. 347 caskets lined the walls. Some are sealed, some are open. And inside these caskets, alongside the embalmed bodies of the recently deceased, lay plastic-wrapped bundles of narcotics. DEA agents opened casket after casket. Fentanyl pills, heroin wrapped in silver foil, cocaine in vacuum-sealed bags pressed against the bodies of dead children, dead elderly people, dead people from every walk of American life. The inventory seized that night: 2.1 million fentanyl pills, 800 kilograms of cocaine, 230 kilograms of heroin. Street value: $387 million. But the real shock was not the quantity. It was what they found sealed in a steel box beneath the office floorboards. Encrypted hard drives, ledgers written in code, and a master list. A master list of every funeral home in the network, 67 of them, spanning from California to New York. Every single facility was owned by a shell corporation. Every single shell corporation traced back to the same parent entity, a nonprofit called American Dignity Foundation for the Grieving, a nonprofit with offices in Springfield, Illinois, a nonprofit whose director was appointed personally by Governor Marcus Devereaux. Within the hour, FBI forensic specialists were cracking the encrypted drives in a downtown Chicago field office. What they saw on those screens made the room go silent. This was not smuggling. This was architecture. This was the design. The network had a code name, Operation Eternal Rest, and it had been in development for 4 years. The master plan showed a continental drug transportation corridor using funeral homes as strategic depots across 12 states. The plan showed buy-in from the Valdez Cartel, a brutal Mexican organization that made the Sinaloa cartel look like amateurs. The Valdez Cartel had been searching for a distribution method that law enforcement would never detect. Dead bodies crossed state lines without search warrants. Funeral homes were regulated by states, not federal agencies. Cremation records were sealed. Burials were sacred. No one, absolutely no one, suspected the dead. The financial flows were staggering. Shell companies buying funeral homes. Ghost corporations transferring ownership. Sham charities. Fake non-profits. Money flowing in from Mexico through restaurant chains and border towns. Through fake agricultural exports. Through logistics firms that did not exist. Money flowing out through casket manufacturers, embalming supply companies, and cremation service contractors. Over 4 years, the network had moved approximately $432 million through funeral homes alone. But the truly chilling discovery was at the center of it all: encrypted authorization keys. Digital signatures on every major transaction. Every shipment. Every burial authorization. Every transfer. All traced back to one person: Governor Marcus Devereaux. Devereaux had not simply allowed this to happen. He had designed it. He had orchestrated it. He had turned the state of Illinois into a secured cartel fortress. The governor had issued executive orders to reduce funeral home inspections by 85%. He had appointed his personal associates to mortuary licensing boards. He had signed off on tax exemptions for the American Dignity Foundation. He had made state police stand down from certain neighborhoods where cartel operations were concentrated. This was not corruption. This was command-level collusion. This was engineered treason. By 4:41 a.m., federal agents were moving to 43 simultaneous locations across Illinois. A joint task force of over 900 federal agents, ICE deportation officers, DEA investigators, and FBI tactical teams had been mobilized. The goal was simple: arrest every funeral home director, every cartel representative, every state official implicated in the operation, and find Governor Devereaux before he disappeared. They hit funeral homes in Chicago, in Springfield, in Rockford, in Aurora, in Gary, in East St. Louis. Black vans pulled up to funeral home entrances at dawn. Agents moved through the buildings. Some facilities had caches of narcotics hidden in walls. Some had entire drug laboratories operating in basement freezer units. One funeral home in Chicago's South Side had converted an entire cremation facility into a fentanyl pill pressing operation. Agents counted 16,000 pills per day rolling off industrial machines. The funeral directors did not go quietly. Some tried to destroy documents. Some tried to run. At a facility in Springfield, a cartel distributor named Ricardo Santos opened fire on federal agents. Shots were exchanged. Santos was wounded, arrested, and evacuated by helicopter. At another location in Gary, an IC agent named Thomas Garrett was struck in the shoulder by a stray round. He was treated and released within hours. He came back to the operation before lunch. By the time the sun rose fully over the Illinois skyline, it was over. 67 funeral homes. 432 arrests. The seizure numbers were staggering: 3.6 million fentanyl pills, 2.2 tons of cocaine, 400 kilograms of heroin, $12 million in cash seized from funeral home safe deposit boxes, 14 tons of equipment, machinery, and supplies related to drug production, one underground tunnel system connecting 3 funeral homes in the Chicago area, and one empty office in the Illinois State House. Governor Marcus Devereaux was not in his residence. He was not at his vacation property. He was not in his office. Federal investigators found his desk ransacked. His safe is empty. Security camera footage showed him leaving the building at 2:17 a.m., 13 minutes after the first federal raids began. Someone had tipped him off. Someone inside the government had made a call. The hunt for Devereaux would consume the next 72 hours. And while federal agents searched for the governor, forensic specialists were excavating something far darker. They were uncovering how deep into law enforcement the cartel had burrowed. At the FBI field office in Chicago, agents began cross-referencing seized communications with internal law enforcement databases. What emerged was a second police force, a shadow enforcement network controlled entirely by the cartel and Governor Devereaux. Over 47 Chicago police officers had been on cartel payroll. 23 Illinois state police sergeants and detectives had been compromised. 9 federal agents, DEA and IC investigators, had betrayed their oaths. The pattern was systematic. Border agents at official checkpoints had been paid to ignore funeral home deliveries heading toward Mexico. Police patrol routes had been altered so that certain neighborhoods remained unsupervised for exact windows of time, windows that corresponded with cartel supply movements. Internal law enforcement databases had been accessed and manipulated. Raid schedules had been leaked. Undercover operations had been compromised. An entire intelligence apparatus had been inverted and weaponized. One Chicago police lieutenant named David Reeves had been earning $240,000 per year from the cartel. His job: make sure funeral home shipments moved unmolested. His method: arrest officers who asked questions, create fake investigations to occupy federal attention, plant evidence on rival dealers to eliminate competition. Lieutenant Reeves would eventually be arrested at his home in the suburbs, handcuffed in his own driveway in front of his family. The image would haunt Chicago for months. But Reeves was not the worst. A federal judge named William Prescott had issued sealed warrants that protected cartel operations. He had rejected surveillance requests. He had dismissed cases against funeral home owners. He had ensured that anyone arrested by local police would be released within hours. Judge Prescott was found in a hotel room in Wisconsin with a bullet in his temple. Whether it was suicide or murder, whether it was removal of evidence or removal of a liability, was never determined. The honest officers, and there were many, were devastated. Captain Maria Gonzalez of the Chicago Police Department watched as colleagues she had trusted for 15 years were led away in handcuffs. She would later tell investigators, "We were not just infiltrated, we were invaded. They had taken over. We were working for them and didn't even know it." The anger was not directed at the individual officers as much as at the system that had made such infiltration possible. Internal affairs investigators realized that they had been too trusting, that they had not questioned patterns, that they had ignored red flags. The entire department would undergo a federal oversight process. The entire state police force would be reorganized from the ground up. Meanwhile, the hunt for Governor Devereaux continued, and federal agents were preparing for something even larger. At dawn, a unified command center was established at a federal facility just outside of Chicago. A massive digital war room, satellite feeds, real-time communications. Commanders from the FBI, DEA, ICE, DHS, and military liaison officers stood before a giant digital map of the continental United States. Red markers pulsed across 12 states: California, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, New York, Georgia. Each marker represented a facility, a distribution point, or a major cartel checkpoint that had been compromised. The scope of the operation was staggering. The Valdez cartel had not just hidden drugs in funeral homes across 12 states. They had established a complete supply chain. Drugs entered the United States through funeral homes in Texas and Arizona near the border. The narcotics were processed in funeral home facilities in Kansas and Oklahoma. They were distributed across the middle of the country through funeral homes in Missouri and Iowa. They were repackaged and sold through facilities in major cities: Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, New York, Atlanta. And they were exported back to Mexico through funeral homes in California. This was not a smuggling operation. This was a supply system. A designed, engineered, optimized supply system that could move 400 tons of narcotics per year without triggering a single DEA alert. The decision was made to strike everything simultaneously. 2,000 federal agents mobilized across 12 states. SWAT teams, ICE tactical units, DEA investigators, FBI specialists, National Guard units placed on standby, U.S. Navy vessels diverted toward coastal ports where cartel shipments were confirmed. Military reconnaissance aircraft began surveillance flights over border regions. This would be the largest coordinated federal law enforcement operation since the invasion of Panama. Operation Eternal Rest Phase 2 began at 6 a.m. across 12 states simultaneously. In Los Angeles, federal agents raided a funeral home in downtown LA that was also the headquarters for the Western Distribution Network. They seized 830 kilograms of cocaine stored in caskets. They arrested 23 cartel distributors and 3 corrupt Los Angeles police detectives. The operation was bloody. One cartel member opened fire on agents. He was neutralized. 2 agents sustained injuries. The facility was secured by 6:34 a.m. In Phoenix, Arizona, agents descended on a cremation facility that doubled as a fentanyl pressing operation. The facility was hidden inside a larger mortuary complex. Agents found 60,000 fentanyl pills rolling off industrial presses every single day. The pill count exceeded 16 million units. This was production on an industrial scale. Arrests made: 31 individuals, including the facility manager and 2 Arizona State Corrections officers who had been providing security. In San Antonio, Texas, federal agents and ICE teams raided 4 funeral homes simultaneously that were operating as drug processing centers near the Mexican border. The narcotics were prepared here, sorted by destination, and packaged for movement north. Agents seized 2.3 tons of cocaine, 600 kilograms of heroin, and 1.9 million fentanyl pills in a single sweep. The operation took 45 minutes. 17 arrests. 2 suspects attempted to flee toward Mexico. They were apprehended by ICE agents at a checkpoint 15 miles from the border. In Denver, Kansas City, and Minneapolis, similar operations unfolded. Drug seizures. Arrest. Cartel members captured. Corrupt officers arrested alongside their criminal associates. The coordination was flawless. Every raid hit its target within a 10-minute window. By 9 a.m., federal agents had arrested 382 individuals across 12 states. They had seized enough narcotics to supply the entire nation for 3 months. But the operation was not over. It was escalating. At 10:17 a.m., military aircraft appeared over the Arizona border. B-1B bombers flying at low altitude, their presence alone sending a message to cartel operations below. F-15 fighter jets conducted surveillance sorties over known drug production facilities. The U.S. Navy diverted 2 guided missile destroyers toward the port of Los Angeles and San Diego, positioned to intercept maritime shipments attempting to smuggle cartel narcotics by sea. This was psychological warfare. This was showing the cartel that the United States government had committed not just law enforcement resources, but military power. This was making it clear that the operation was not a raid. It was an invasion. By noon, the magnitude of what federal agents had uncovered became apparent. The Valdez cartel had been using American funeral homes to process, distribute, and export between 350 and 430 tons of narcotics per year. For 4 years. The total amount of drugs moved through this network, approximately 1.6 million kilograms of cocaine, cocaine precursors, and cocaine derivatives, 500,000 kilograms of heroin, 18 million fentanyl pills, 37 tons of methamphetamine. This was not a network. This was a production distribution empire disguised as American death care infrastructure. The financial investigation revealed something equally catastrophic. The Valdez cartel had funneled $763 million into the American economy through funeral homes, funeral-related businesses, and associated shell corporations. They had purchased real estate. They had invested in legitimate businesses. They had placed their capital in American banks. They had, in effect, become American corporations. The line between cartel operations and legitimate business had been completely erased, and Governor Marcus Devereaux had made it possible. Devereaux was found 74 hours later, not fleeing, not hiding in a motel room. He was found exactly where federal investigators predicted he would be, at his family's private airstrip near the Wisconsin border, attempting to board a private jet bound for the Cayman Islands. FBI agents surrounded the aircraft at 4:19 p.m. Devereaux was in his car, driving toward the runway, when agents stopped him. He was arrested without incident. He did not resist. He did not curse. He simply sat silently in the back of the FBI vehicle. His political career concluded in the span of 5 days. In Devereaux's possession, a briefcase containing $37 million in cash and bearer bonds, bank routing numbers for offshore accounts, encrypted phones, a passport under a false name, documentation showing he had been receiving payments from the Valdez cartel dating back 6 years, 2 years before the funeral home operation even began. The investigation into Devereaux's relationship with the cartel revealed a sordid story of blackmail, ambition, and greed. He had been compromised during his time as Chicago's police commissioner. Cartel operatives had evidence of his affair with a subordinate officer. They had leverage. They used it. From that point forward, Devereaux was theirs. They owned him. They promoted him. They funded his campaign for governor. And once he held that office, they had him redesign the entire power structure of the state to serve their interests. The message was clear. The Valdez cartel did not just smuggle drugs. They corrupted systems. They inverted hierarchies. They created shadow governments. And they had done it in plain sight. By the end of the 3rd week, the tally was complete. 67 funeral homes shut down. 47 Chicago police officers arrested. 23 Illinois state police officers arrested. 9 federal agents were arrested. 1 sitting federal judge died. 1 state governor was arrested. 1 Valdez cartel leadership cell dismantled. Over 580 individuals were arrested across 12 states. 940,000 fentanyl pills seized. Over 4 tons of cocaine seized. 730 kilograms of heroin seized. $61 million in cash seized. Multiple drug production facilities destroyed. 3 underground tunnel systems collapsing after federal demolition. The underworld took more damage in 7 days than it had taken in the previous 7 years. But as agents packed files and documented seizures, as prosecutors began building cases and judges began scheduling trials, something darker became apparent. This was not an isolated incident. The federal investigation discovered evidence that the Valdez cartel had been attempting to establish similar networks in 14 other states. Similar cartel government infiltration operations. Similar shadow law enforcement. Similar funeral home networks. The invasion had not ended. It had merely been interrupted. In a secure federal facility, counterintelligence analysts began identifying other compromised officials across the country. A mayor in San Antonio connected to cartel money. A police chief in Newark with suspicious bank accounts. A state legislator in New Mexico taking bribes. A federal prosecutor in El Paso who had been dismissing cartel-related cases. The list grew. The scope expanded. What had seemed like a contained operation, Operation Eternal Rest, was revealed to be a continental strategy. The Valdez Cartel was not trying to sell drugs in America. They were trying to buy America, one city at a time, one official at a time, one institution at a time. They had weaponized death itself as a supply chain. They had turned grief into profit. They had made American funerals the infrastructure of a drug empire. The cost, when calculated, was catastrophic. 800,000 people had died of fentanyl overdose in the past 5 years. Nearly all of it had come from Valdez Cartel sources. 800,000 Americans. Daughters, sons, mothers, fathers. People who never knew that their final overdose was part of a designed operation, a designed network, a designed empire. Entire neighborhoods had been destroyed. Families had been obliterated. Communities had been hollowed out. An entire generation of young Americans have been casualties of an operation orchestrated not just by cartel members, but by a sitting governor and federal officials who had taken oaths to protect citizens. The system would need to be rebuilt from the ground up. The American criminal justice system would undergo transformation. Police departments would implement new oversight protocols. Funeral homes would be subject to federal regulation for the first time. Intelligence agencies would establish new monitoring procedures. The entire infrastructure of death, which had never been heavily regulated or scrutinized, would become a focal point of federal security. But the question that haunted everyone involved was this: how deep did it go? How many other networks were in operation? How many other officials had been compromised? How many other institutions had been weaponized? And most terrifying, how long would it take for the next attempt? Power does not always require open violence to spread. Sometimes it only requires silence. Sometimes it only requires ambition. Sometimes it only requires people willing to look away. The Valdez Cartel had not conquered America with force. They had conquered it with corruption. They had not invaded with armies. They had invaded with money. What Operation Eternal Rest revealed was a fundamental vulnerability in American systems. We protect our borders. We protect our buildings. But we had not protected our institutions. We had not protected our officials. And we had not protected the sanctity of death itself. The cartel had found the opening, and they had walked through it. 800,000 dead. Entire communities destroyed. A state government converted into a cartel apparatus. Law enforcement infiltrated at every level. And all of it hidden inside coffins. All of it hidden inside caskets. All of it hidden inside the one institution that no one suspects because it deals with the one moment that defines us all, the moment when we return to the earth. The prosecutions began immediately. Governor Marcus Devereaux would face 27 counts of conspiracy, money laundering, drug trafficking, and racketeering. The charges carried a potential sentence of 340 years in prison. But the prosecution of the cases would take years. The investigation would never truly end. Because somewhere in the continental United States, federal investigators know that the Valdez Cartel is attempting to replicate this network. Somewhere, another official is being blackmailed. Somewhere, another funeral home is being purchased. Somewhere, another death care institution is being weaponized. The operation has not ended. It has only been delayed. This story is a warning about institutional corruption, about how power can be infiltrated at the highest levels, about how the organizations designed to protect us can be inverted and weaponized to destroy us, about how ambition, combined with greed and darkness, can metastasize through an entire system. This is a fictional dramatization. All names have been changed. All characters are fictional. The Valdez Cartel is invented. Governor Marcus Devereaux is invented. The timeline has been compressed. But the vulnerability is real. The infiltration tactics are real. The methods are real. If this story troubled you, if it made you uncomfortable, then share it, comment, expose. Because the war against organized crime is not fought by heroes in movies. It is fought by federal agents, by honest police officers, by prosecutors who believe in the system. And they cannot fight it alone. Subscribe. Stay informed. Because darkness operates in silence. And the antidote to silence is attention. The antidote to corruption is awareness. The antidote to infiltration is vigilance. This was Operation Eternal Rest. This was how a cartel turned American death into an empire. And this is why we must remain awake.